welcome to the Leaders of Africa Hangouts. It is great to be with all of you today. As you know, my name is Jelili Adebi Adegboyega. I'm glad to be your host for today's Hangouts. The Leaders of Africa Hangouts is a live show, an experience featuring conversations and presentations that are informative, interactive, and informal. We invite you to discuss and interact with us. Please do hit that subscribe button on YouTube and click the bell to receive notification for all of Leaders of Africa news content. Some of you have joined us in the last minute, and if you're interested in learning more about Leaders of Africa, I invite you to visit our website, leadersofafrica.org. And you can also engage with us on our various platforms on Discord, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Get into the topics of today's conversation, which is entitled The Perception of Taxation and the Use of Tax Revenue with Ghana as a Case Study. A major concern with taxes is shared across different countries. Taxes are important to financing government priorities and schemes, including health insurance, social grant, and development projects. Ghana, like other countries in Africa and in the global north, is facing the problem of tax revenue, and particularly by underperforming government expenditure. Part of the problem is compliance. In a new publication, a Leader of Africa alumni, Mr. Isaac Bortey, explored public perception on tax compliance and how the perception of the use of taxes by government shape views on compliance. We are happy to host Mr. Isaac today on our Hangout series to share insight from his most recent publication. Mr. Isaac, for your information, is a policy analyst and a development practitioner, presently with the Ghana Audit Service. He's also a contributor to economic policy with the Future African Forum and the Policy Corner in Ghana. Mr. Isaac, I'm glad to host you today. How do you feel about your article that got published by Afrobarometer? Because we've met a great number of top guys in the field of policy and taxation in the African continent that have spoken so highly about your article. How do you feel about those kinds of responses as a scholar of the Leaders of Africa Institute?
Yeah, foremost, I must say thanks to the Leaders of African Institute for the knowledge impartation that I had during the research methods program. Well, when the article was published, it sparked a lot of public debate, which led to a roundtable discussion held by one of the prominent think tanks in the country. And it was just about around the time when the government was proposing some new taxes. So it generated a lot of public discussion around taxation within the country. And I must say, I felt great about it.
Oh, that's great to know. So are you so excited about your presentation today?
Sure. I'm excited about sharing the findings with other participants and other enthusiasts about development on the continent.
Okay, let's get started, Isaac. And you have 15 minutes to do your presentation. And you can do it for like 20 minutes or thereabouts so that we can have extensive conversation to drive this issue that is very important to addressing development challenges on the African continent. So you have the floor to get your presentation started.
All right. Once again, thanks, Ghana, for having me. And good afternoon to all our participants who have taken time off your busy schedule to join us this afternoon on Leaders of African Institute Hangout. Well, today my mission is very simple. Here to talk about a problem which is common to most African countries, which is basically taxation. As the famous reggae artist Lucky Dube once said, I pay my lawyer to fight for my rights. I pay my bodyguard to protect my body. There is only one man that I pay, but I don't know what I'm paying for. And obviously, talking about a tax man. No one likes to pay taxes. Everyone resents when it happens that he has to pay taxes. But tax is the necessary evil. We need it to develop are being used, and then whether people are happy about the way their taxes are being used in the countries in which they are being accessed. This afternoon, I'm sharing with you the perception of that. Obviously, it's a common phenomenon, as Professor said from the beginning. Most of the tax revenue, but a little is being collected. How do people feel about it? Do they think it's the right amount? Do they think their government are using the revenue as they said they will use it for? So to kickstart, well, as I've said, nobody pays taxes. Obviously, the government takes taxes from people. And as we might all be aware, taxes are normally enforced exactions. They are not voluntary contributions that we do to the state. Rather, one way or the other, we are being enforced to pay taxes to the government of our countries. Because some people resent the payment of taxes, there have been fines and penalties that are designed to ensure that people comply to the tax laws of their countries. But in spite of all these enforcement mechanisms, I'm sure you might have heard of people trying to evade taxes and people not willing to even pay taxes. It therefore becomes very important for us to look at what people's perception about taxation in their country, and that can inform policymakers as to how best they can get people to willingly comply to the tax laws in their country. Now, let's look at the tax economy of Ghana, which is not too different from most of the developing countries. In fact, most of us may be from Africa, and if you're in Africa, the issues are not too different. They have the same form, the structures may be slightly different. Well, in Ghana, the country faces an overspending, a spending that is always almost above revenue that is being raised from the country, of the gross domestic product in the country. It tells you obviously that, well, the country is spending more than it receives. But obviously, the argument is always in two folds. Some will ask, well, is it a case of overspending or spending too much? Or is it a case that little is being collected from the people? So you could look at it from two sides. But the fact remains the same, that well, the deficit situation in the country keeps expanding, and it doesn't look like it's something that is going to reverse in the short term. When we look at the situation of debt in the country, well, in 2020 alone, the country has a debt situation of 70% of GDP, whereas above the sustainable debt threshold that was given by the World Bank of 70%. The country currently tells you that the country is highly indebted and something must be done to reverse this trend. Now, in Ghana, and just like in most African countries, the informal tends to dominate. In Ghana alone, we have about 70 to 80% ever been to Africa before. The picture here will not be too strange to you. You have most people in the informal sector who are self-employed, doing some craftsmanship and doing their own stuff, their own self-employment. That's the kind of job that most people are engaged in. Again, another feature of the economy happens to be the low level of digitization in the economy. Most things are manual-based. You go to a government sector and everything has to be paperwork, pushing paper. It cuts across all government institutions, including the tax authorities, that is the Ghana revenue authorities. Most things that goes on there are paper-based. These are common characteristics that affect the Ghanaian economy, and they are common to most African countries. They are no different. So if you have a country that is suffering from a deficit situation, a country that has a high debt situation, a country that is lowly digitized, and a country that is highly informal, it tells you that it has a lot of bearing on tax administration within the country. Well, let's look at some taxes that apply in Ghana. And I think most of them may apply in other African countries, probably with slight differentiation. In Ghana, we have taxes at the individual level, and we also have taxes at the business level. At the individual level, we have the popular one, which is normally known as income tax, which is known as pay as you earn, and it's normally calculated on the aggregated scale at the end of the month. As you can see, it's pay as you earn. So mostly it applies to the formal sector, those who work in the formal sector. They normally, because they are being paid from the employers before the money hits into the account, the pay as you earn has been deducted as the income tax. How are the tax authorities being able to collect taxes from them? Another kind of tax that is also being collected at the individual level is the vehicle income tax, where it's taken quarterly from people who are into commercial vehicle businesses. We also have the tax stamp for small scale businesses, which is also collected on a quarterly basis within the country. At the business level, we have the corporate. If you're a business into the mining and petroleum, then you'll pay a tax of 35% on your taxable income. If you are into any other form of business, then you are liable to a 25% on your taxable income. We also have the withholding tax, which applies to different kinds of businesses. And then we also have the mineral royalties tax, which is levied at 5% on the income. And then currently, we also saw the introduction of the communication service tax. And this applies specifically to the communication sector, where their services are being charged an extra fee of 5%. Obviously, if you're in Ghana now, you realize that these 5% have been shifted to the general public, the value added to goods and services. So basically, these are kind of taxes that are being levied in Ghana. Once you live in Ghana, you are likely to face one of these. Even if not at all, the value added tax will affect you because you definitely go out to buy something and you'll likely be affected by these taxes. Now, following the economic situation in the country, high debt situation, high deficit, and then also with the sudden COVID-19 that hit the country, while spending went above. And as always, it is the government always wants an opportunity to collect more taxes or levy more taxes. The country has seen new taxes in the form of a 1% increase in the national health insurance levy, another 1% increase in the value-added tax in the country. There is also a new energy sector recovery levy of about 20% per liter on fuel. Well, this very one, if you're in Ghana, you will know the popular term known as doomso, where your light goes on today, the next hour it's off, the next hour it's on. So a new introduction of taxes that can be used to address some of these systemic problems in the economy. We've also been levied with a sanitation and pollution tax of 10 pesos per liter of fuel. So it tells you, well, fuel prices in Ghana is not something that is going to come down anytime soon. We also have a new tax being the financial sector cleanup levy. That the banks will absorb. They are likely to shift it to their consumers or to their customers. Now, beginning out an ambitious tax revenue target. In 2020, they actualized a total tax revenue of 7.7 billion from all their sources of taxation. That's both from an individual level and the business level. They actualized 7.7 billion. But in 2021, they came out with a proposal, or yet a provisional value, that they want to actualize 10 billion in 2021. Well, given the COVID pandemic situation and looking at how the economy is structured, well, we are hoping that they'll be able to raise this amount, but it still looks ambitious to most people in the country. Now, this afternoon, what will we be discussing? What are we here actually to look into? What are we going to talk about? Basically, we are going to look at the of Ghanaians on the legitimacy of taxation. How do Ghanaians think about taxation in their country? Do they think it's a right thing for the tax authorities to collect taxes from them, or they think otherwise? We are also going to look at their perception on the governing body that is mandated to collect taxes, that's the Ghana Revenue Authority. And this is very important because depending on how the people think about the authority that pays their taxes, it's likely to influence their willingness to collect taxes. We're also going to look at a very critical one, what people think or what Ghanaians think about the use of their tax. Obviously, yes, there's always a gap between spending and then the tax. But the little that the government collects, what do Ghanaians think about the use of it? Do they know what the government uses their taxes for, or they do not? Now, a common phenomenon that always comes up when tax is being mentioned is the issues of tax avoidance and evasion, particularly with multinationals and other individual businesses. The question is, well, what do people think in this country? Do they think that their colleagues or other multinationals in the country frequently engage in tax avoidance and tax evasion? And then also, we also look at tax versus external borrowing. Do people think it's right for the government to continue taxing for development purposes, or it's time for the government to step up its external borrowing to fund development? So it's a question of, do you prefer the government levy more tax to develop the country, or you think the government should go out and borrow to develop the country? Well, this perception that we are going to discuss, where is the data coming from? It's not the kind of data that we just sat in our room or somebody sat in this room to come up with. But the data is from the Afrobarometer service. And I'm sure quite a number of us here might have heard of Afrobarometer. The Afrobarometer is a Pan-African non-partisan survey research network that provides reliable data on African experiences and evaluation of democracy, governance, and quality of state. It normally goes down 38 African countries. So this tells you that, well, this is a very well-grounded organization that has a lot of experience when it comes to collecting primary data or survey data for the people. In Ghana as well, we've witnessed 8 rounds of the survey. And normally, Afrobarometer interviews 2,400 adult people within the country to gather their data. This very perception survey is based on around 8 data. That's the most latest one from Afrobarometer was used for this very study. Now, let's zoom into what Ghanaians think about taxation in their country. Now, when Ghanaians were asked a simple question, do you think the Ghana Revenue Authority has the right to make people pay taxes in the country? There was a resounding majority from Ghanaians. We have 7 or 8 about 10 Ghanaians saying that, well, they agree or strongly agree that the Ghana Revenue Authority has the right to make people pay taxes. This tells you that, well, that Ghanaians are more enlightened about the need for taxation. They think it's important for there to be a governing authority that will be in charge of collecting taxation. So they agree to the fact that, yes, the tax authorities have the right to make people in the country pay taxes. The people interviewed who decided to the fact that the tax authority question about the Ghana Revenue Authority itself, that's the body mandated for collecting taxes. What do people think about them? Do they trust them a lot? Do they trust them somewhat? Do they trust them at all? Or they do not trust them even at all? We could see that, well, you don't have a lot of people who trust the Ghana Revenue Authority a lot. It's just about 10%, was just 10% of those interviewed who said, well, they trust the government body mandated for collecting taxes a lot. We have about 27 who said they do not trust them at all. It tells you that, well, there's a lot of work that the Ghana Revenue Authority has to do in lifting its own image, place. Because if you have only 10% of your population saying they trust the tax authorities, it speaks a lot about the body that collects taxes. And it goes a long way to affect their willingness to pay taxes. If I do not trust an organization, I don't think I'll be happy to commit my funds to them. Similarly, I don't think if you don't trust the authority that's taking your money from you, you channel it to the government for the right use, you will not be comfortable taxes to them. So here we have it. 27% of Ghanaians says they do not trust the Ghana Revenue Authority at all. Only 10% says they trust them a lot. Now, when people were asked about the old problem, the canker problem that has bedeviled most developing Canada's corruption, when they were asked, well, do you think officials of the Ghana Revenue Authority are engaged in corruption? Well, people did not shy away at all. We have about 51% of Ghanaians saying, well, some of them are involved in corruption. That means Ghanaians, 51% of Ghanaians perceive that, well, the officials in Ghana one common form of corruption in the among tax officials that are raised in Ghana has to do with the issue of undercarboning, where when they come to you to collect taxes, they do something called undercarboning, where they put a different sheet under. So they write an amount for you, but not exactly CATF. So some of them are engaged in corrupt practices, while 34% are certain or very sure. They say, well, most or all of them are engaged in corruption. We all know how corruption goes a long way to erode the quality of development in the country. It even goes a long way to affect the democracy level in the country. Here we are seeing Ghanaians saying that, well, I think, or most of them think that what most people who come to them, or the tax officials, are in one way or the other engaged in corrupt practices. Now let's look at whether people know what taxes to pay. It's very important, because if I'm to pay taxes, I need to know what taxes I'm supposed to pay. If no one tells me about the taxes that I'm liable to pay, I may be there without paying the taxes. That boils down to the tax education that's been carried out in the country. But when Ghanaians were asked about whether they knew the taxes to pay and even the fines or penalties that they are supposed to pay in cases of default, 61% says, well, it's very difficult to know the kind of taxes that they are supposed to pay in the country. And this is very worrying, because if you want people to pay taxes to be able to shore up the gap between your revenue and your expenditure, but here lies the case that people do not know what tax they are supposed to pay. That tells you that, well, the Ghana revenue is no excuse. But when it comes to paying taxes, it's very important. You need people to pay the taxes. So if it means going out to do public broadcast for people to know the kind of taxes they're supposed to pay, I think the Ghana revenue authorities must step up to do that. I think the same thing applies to more developing countries, particularly African countries, where people walk around not knowing what taxes are within their countries that they're supposed to pay. You walk to people to talk to them about some forms of taxes, and they tell you, well, I have not heard this before, and I don't think I'm going to ever pay for this kind of tax. So the question or the issue goes back to the tax authorities within the Africa make room to pay those kind of taxes. Now, to the big question, do Ghana the government does with their taxes? Is it easy for them to know that, well, the taxes that we pay, this is what the government uses it for. This is what the government used the tax that we pay for. When this question was posed to Ghanaians, that do they know, or how easy or difficult is it for them to know what the government does with their taxes? We are whooping 70%, a large majority saying that, well, we do not know what government does with their taxes. And this is something that most African countries will complain about. People pay taxes and they end up saying, well, we pay taxes, we do not see our roads being developed. We pay taxes and our basic services such as water, electricity, education are not being taken care of. So the question is, what are you using our taxes for? This goes a long way to affect our raising tax revenue. If we keep paying taxes and you get anything in return, you start asking questions. Know what these taxes are being used for. And if you follow the decentralized system in government, you realize that most municipalities that the lower level government face a lot of this problem. In fact, bylaws to raise revenue within their municipalities, they face a lot of backlash from their people because they claim that, well, you take this kind of taxes from us and we don't know what you're using for. We even come for assembly meetings and you cannot even translate to your national level. People keep saying that, well, we do not know what we are using our taxes for. All we know is every now and then new taxes are being leveled for us to pay, but we don't know exactly what these taxes are being for. It tells to us about the issue of the tax transparency or the usage or the transparency, the usage of the budget resources within the country. Are people aware of how their taxes are being used? Is it transparent for people to know the funding sources of some projects that are? These all help in shaping people's perception, knowing what exactly their taxes are being used for, and will go a long way to motivate them if they will have to pay taxes willingly. Now, in terms of the rate of taxes in Ghana, as we discussed earlier, the corporate tax rate in Ghana is 25% for other businesses and 35% for the mining and then the mining and the petroleum industry. For the income taxes, the highest within the graduated bracket is 30%, which I think starts from people earn above 240,000 Ghana cedis within a year. But when Ghanaians were asked about how high their taxes are, we had a majority of them, that 35% say, well, the amount that they pay is about the right amount. They do not think it's too much. Only 21% think it's too much. So it tells you that, well, the issue is not really about the rate or the level of taxes that Ghanaians are paying. It's other things that comes to play, like whether they know exactly what it's being used for, or even knowing what taxes to pay. Because clearly they think, well, the amount that they pay, it's not too much. It's just about the right amount. So other things comes to play. Are the amount that they're being paid, they are paying being used for the right purposes? Do they even know what taxes to use, or some so-called big men are siphoning the money for their personal gain? Now, the issue of and very, very common in most African countries. When Ghanaians were asked, do you think multinationals or your fellow Ghanaians are involved out of 10 Ghanaians saying that, well, tax evasion or tax avoidance, they the right amount of taxes that they are supposed to pay taxes, but they do not pay these taxes or tax avoidance. People think that there are a lot of people saying that, well, everyone does it, so I will also join. What it going to mean is that we are going to see a further shortfall in tax revenue. Because if people can go away scot-free with it and use the tax money for other purposes, then why should others take the pain to go and sacrifice and pay tax to the government. So it's important that the government has to plug all the loopholes within the system that gives chance for people to evade tax. Companies for unpaid petroleum tax running into millions of Ghana cedis. These are OMCs that have been given concessions to drill oil in the country, yet they have been taxes that they are due to the state. So the Ghana Revenue Authorities has to go after them to change them or to collect taxes that they owe. And this is not common to just OMCs. A lot of other companies within the country, as has been shown by the perception of Ghanaians, are also engaged in this form of tax evasion. So it's clearly that, well, much must be done to plug the loopholes within the system to avoid people in evading taxes within the country. Now, as I said earlier, well, the economy of Ghana is dominated by the informal sector. Most of the people are involved in the informal sector, just like in most African countries, Nigeria, Cameroon. We have a lot of the population involved in the informal sector, where they are self-employed or doing some craftsman work. When Ghanaians were asked that, well, do you think the government should take every step to ensure that the informal sector pays the taxes that they are due? There was a resounding majority again. 73% of Ghanaians say, well, the government should ensure that the informal sector pays the taxes that they are due. It tells you that the few population that are involved in the formal sector are becoming overburdened with the tax situation. There are those who keep paying the taxes to support the development of the country, whilst those who are in the informal sector, who one way or the other may be making a lot of money, are not being chased or are not being followed up by the government to ensure that they pay the amount of taxes that they are supposed to pay. And that is a very big issue within most of the developing world, because if you look at the setup of most of the informal sectors, most of them are not registered businesses. So it's difficult for the tax authorities to trace them. Most of them do not even keep their books. They don't keep very good financial records. So it's even very difficult to audit them for tax purposes. It tells you that a lot of work has to be done by the tax authorities to make sure that people pay the taxes that they're supposed to pay, particularly those in the informal sector. Measures and structures have been put in place to regularize their businesses, probably register them, and find a way to ensure that they pay the taxes that they are due to pay to the state. Now, to the big question, do Ghanaians think that taxes should be used in developing the country, or the government should continue paying external loans for development? Well, it was obvious that majority of Ghanaians feel that, well, it's time. They are willing for the government, they are willing to pay more taxes to finance the country's development from their own resources. They do not prefer the government going out to procure external loans for development. Rather, they are much more willing, 72%, that's 7 out of 10 Ghanaians say, well, they are willing to pay more taxes to finance the country's development from their own resources. It tells you that, again, it's not an issue about how much they're paying, but they really want to see the tax being used for the purposes for which they are collected. And if they can clearly see that, they'll be more than willing to continue paying taxes for development of the country. Collect taxes, which comes with a lot of strings and a lot of generational interest, debt payment that has to be paid in the future. So they rather prefer to finance the country's development with their own resources. And I think this applies to most developing countries as well. If you see your government using your tax for the right purposes, you are more than willing to continue paying taxes. If your tap or your water flows 24/7, why won't you be willing to pay taxes to continue enjoying this? If you have constant supply of electricity, why won't you continue to pay taxes to continue enjoying this? If you have good roads, why won't you be willing to pay taxes to finance development? But if it's otherwise, then it becomes a problem to most of these developing countries. Now, to conclude on our discussions to advance taxation in the country. First of all, well, recently or just last month, the Ghana Revenue Authority has provided alternative methods of paying taxes. They have now included direct bank transfer. They've included straight transfers, debit or credit card transfers, mobile money, mobile apps, and internet banking as new alternative methods of paying taxes. But clearly, this is long overdue. I mean, 21st century, and you are now trying to introduce internet banking, mobile money, or paying with the debit card for your taxes. Because currently, as it stands, it's normally paid either through the organizations writing check in the name of the Ghana Revenue Authority or walking to the tax offices to pay your taxes. This is something that most businesses are too busy to be engaged with, walking to the tax office to pay taxes. It is just this year that the Ghana Revenue Authority has introduced alternative methods for paying taxes with the aid of the Penalty and Interest Waiver Act 2021. That's Act 1065 in Ghana. Well, what this act seeks to do is to empower the Ghana Revenue Authority to have the power to waive the penalties or interest on accumulated tax debt that are owed by some companies. So if you're a company that has defaulted on your tax for, let's say, 5 years, now the Ghana Revenue Authority has the right to waive off the interest payments or the penalties on this debt or tax debt that you owe for you to just pay the principal amount. So this is just a way to make most companies regularize their tax system or their tax payment to the Ghana Revenue Authority. And as I said earlier, most of them have avoided paying tax for a long time. Owe the Ghana Revenue Authority a lot in taxes. And when they regularize their tax payment to the authorities, the interest and the penalty on the default pushes them back and they do not go forward to do this. Now, a law is to waive off some of this interest and interest payment on debt accumulation so that companies or businesses can come forward to pay their taxes going forward. Now, so now they have introduced the integrated tax application and processing system, which is popularly known as ITAS. One sheet of paper that you have to fill to be able to pay for credit or they do not like to engage in. So now the Ghana Revenue Authorities have introduced the ITAPS, which is an integrated system where you go into their website to key in some few details and it will be able to calculate the tax amount for you without going through a lot of paperwork. They've also introduced a synchronizing process to synchronize all identification tax or identification cards for tax purposes. Previously in Ghana, or as it stands, is any of them as they use as the card, tomorrow we see another person using it. And this has made it difficult for the tax authorities to have tax identification number for everybody. So now they are migrating all forms of identification onto one card, which is known as the Ghana card, which will be used for identifying all taxpayers within the country. And this will be easier for them to chase up for taxes that people owe. So these are some of the new initiatives. Taxes are being collected from people, and then people also know what taxes.
Recording in progress.
People also know what taxes they're supposed to pay, and can also follow to know that they have the right to waive off some of their interest. And then also, when government uses their tax revenue, they can easily monitor to know that my taxes are being used. So it boils down to the same issues. People really want to know, or Ghanaians want to know what their taxes are being used for. Do they trust those who collect taxes from them? As you've seen, they do not really trust them. What they use their taxes for, they do not really know. So for policymakers, it's very important that they make it very transparent for people to know what their taxes are being used for. They also have to do what it takes to be able to prop up the confidence that people have in their tax authorities so that paying taxes will not be a difficult challenge to most people. Thank you very much, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Isaac, for this very brilliant presentation. And I must congratulate you for the enormity of effort that you put into this presentation. It was very stimulating and very engaging. I personally learned a lot of things from your presentation, and I'm sure the participant in today's engagement, live engagement, they've learned a lot of things. And one of the things that came across to me in your presentation is this issue of willingness to fund development by the people, as opposed to the government going to borrow loan from abroad to fund development. What, in your own opinion, possibly explain this attitude. Because the assumption in the development arena is that Africans are not ready to fund development. But the data you share with us today seems to be suggesting that it may not necessarily be the case. What, from your own opinion, explain this attitude of Ghanaians wanting to fund development in their country?
Well, thanks, Prof. Ghana. I think most people are overburdened with the issue of the government going out collect or to borrow for development, because with borrowing comes interest payment. And at high time, when you look at the fiscal statistics of the country, interest payments alone is taking a chunk of the revenue that the country collects. So if the people agree that the country or the government should continue borrowing, and what it means is that we are going to keep on accumulating debt, and the interest payment is always going to increase. In fact, Ghanaians are very much aware that nowadays, even most of the borrowing that the government goes for are not for development purposes, but they are going to borrow to pay interest that have accumulated on other existing debt. So given a chance to choose between paying taxes and going for loan, it's obvious that most of them prefers to pay tax from their own resources of the country to fund development rather than going to borrow to accumulate the debt situation and also increase the interest cost for the country. So I think this is what might influence most Ghanaians to prefer taxes over the country going out to collect debts.
That's great to know. And, I'm sure that this should be sparking a new rounds of research in Africa on whether the same perception holds true in country. And is that something that your future research is going to be looking at, particularly in places like Nigeria and other leading African countries?
Sure, yes. I think there are two areas that have now of much interest to me. One has to be the issue of taxes over external debt. And then the majority of people who think the government should do whatever it takes to collect taxes from the informal sector. It tells you that people or those in the informal sector for me is big for all of us. So going forward, I think more interest, more research should be carried out in that area.
Okay, that's good to know. Let me bring Eva in to drive this conversation, because I have tons of questions for you today. It's such a stimulating, presentation, and I can see a lot of discussion going on in the chat box. It's really, really stimulating. Eva, could you please unmute yourself to engage this conversation?
Isaac, thank you so much. That was really insightful. I see the various form of taxes that is being collected in Ghana. That looks like a lot, and there's a lot of burden on people. My question is, I don't know if you showed this earlier in your presentation about. I just want to know the sources of revenue. What are the sources of revenue for the government of Ghana? Where do they get their revenue from? Do you have any idea? Apart from taxation, is there any other form of sources of revenue that they get money from? That is something I'm curious about. I just want to know. Then from there, I will ask I have another question to ask.
Okay, so thanks, Eva, for your question. And also being a fellow Ghanaian, I'm sure you might also have more insight into Ghanaian economy. Yeah. So basically, the taxes or the revenue for the government of Ghana are from two main sources. Those are the tax revenue and the non-tax revenue. So the tax revenues that I've discussed today in the presentation. Most of these non-tax revenues come in the way of fines in courts, certain royalties that the government collects from certain organizations. Some are the non-tax ones are not well documented, but they are those that the government collects outside the tax realms. Those ones are not covered under the tax laws. As I said, an example has to be the royalties that some of them pay. They are not taxes, but it's a form of non-tax revenue that the government gets from the people. Fines that people pay in the courtroom for maybe cases that they have, those revenue all goes to form the non-tax revenue. At the time, if you look at these two sources of tax revenue and the non-tax revenue for the government of Ghana, tax revenue that dominates the non-tax revenue. So normally, when it comes to revenue for the state, the tax revenues dominate than the tax revenue. People are more concerned about the tax revenue than the non-tax revenue. You know, and it makes sense because, for example, if I didn't have an issue and walk into the court for a whole year, that means that form of non-tax revenue is not like. But once I wake up every morning and dress to go to my office to work, I'm going to pay income tax, which will go to the government. So the concern of most people is normally on the tax aspect of it than the non-tax revenue that the government collects.
Well, I think that our government is not being innovative when it comes to collecting revenues, because you can't develop a nation by imposing heavy amounts of tax on the people to pay. No economy strive like that. But at the end of the day, if people are working and they have to pay 50% or 25% of their money into tax revenue, and they don't see where these taxes are being used, then the issue of tax avoidance, tax evasion is going to be rampant in the country. And you made mention of it. It's happening. People are using illegal means not to pay tax. And one of the issues is that we have, like, as you documented, 80% of the economy is being run by the informal sector. What is the government doing to ensure that the money that is coming from the informal sector is well documented? What are the technologies that have been developed to make sure that they are being able to track the money? Because as you said, you have people that go around with a receipt book where they give people the ticket, right? Whoever pay 1 Ghana cedis or 5 Ghana cedis, they give them the ticket. How sure is the government that these people are recording or reporting the correct amount to the assemblies? So our government have to be innovative, because at the end of the day, if you are taking a lot of money from the people and people even don't know where the money is going or what the money is being used for, then you are creating a lot of problems for yourself. As you were talking about the fact that about 70% of GDP is in debt, like external debt is like 70% of the GDP. Is very problematic. So moving forward, I think we have to be innovative. And the other thing too is with the issue of value-added tax is something that I hated, and I still hate it, because I feel like with value-added, you are really, there's a lot of double taxing, because first of all, you have to think about the market woman who is going to buy the goods from the retailer, and the retailer who is going to buy it from the wholesaler, and the wholesaler who is also going to take it from the main producer or the supplier. There is tax along the way, you know. So at the end of the day, the customer bear the majority of the major brunt of that tax, which in quote is not good, even for the people and for the economy itself. So I think that we have to do better. I thought about Mia said he was the economic magician, and this is going on. Even in the administration, they've imposed more taxes than I've ever seen in my entire life in Ghana.
Thank you so much, Ahiva, for that wonderful contribution. And one other issue I want us to reflect on, Isaac, which seems to be generating a lot of traction in the chat box, has to do with the cost in government. You know, you presented two data that sounds, somewhat contradictory to fund development in Africa, but we don't trust the tax authority. So we need to pay taxes. I may eventually not pay taxes. And your data actually suggests that, because a big percentage of the Kenyan population is evading the payment of taxes in the country. So the question that somebody like Mr. Mujib Abdulsalam in the chat box, he'd like to know is this. There is this issue of accountability that is evident, not just particular to Ghana, but to most African countries. So how do we address this issue of accountability so that more people that are willing to pay taxes will be able to fund development by paying their taxes or even pay more taxes in Africa? So we'd like to know your thoughts on how to make government more accountable, particularly the government institutions that are in charge of generating revenue internally for different government agencies at the state, and the federal level, and even at the local level in different African countries.
Thanks for Ghana, and thanks to brought this interesting question up. Well, I would say for the issue of accountability, transparency is key. Transparency in the sense that what is being collected from the people must be made known and obvious to them. People need to know how much has been collected from them in a particular period. And then also when activities are being undertaken or development projects are being undertaken, people should be able to have access to the document or the financial documentation behind it so that assess whether the project or the development project that is deemed to be funded from their tax revenue is being done efficiently or there is a value for money for whatever the government says is doing. Because it's obvious in most of our developing countries that the government sets out to do something from tax revenue, and the amount that the government says it spends, if you compare that same project or certain development project undertaken by a private organization, you will see a gap in the amount that is being used. That tells you that there's something hidden somewhere. And even getting access to the documentation, that is, or the financial documentation for the project, is a headache in most of these African countries. They will not show it to you. You are not likely to get access to the funding structures or how the project was being funded or how the tax revenues have been used to fund a particular project. So for me, I think for the issue of accountability, transparency, and then making the data available is key for people to know or to access for themselves that, well, this very project that was done of dollars or this amount of cedis out of our tax revenue for the government to do this for us. Then people can confidently say that, okay, my taxes are working. But if you don't know how much is being spent on a project, you just hear a ballpark figure, we spend $2 million to construct a 1 kilometer road, then you're likely to ask questions. So I think transparency in spending is key if we have to achieve accountability.
So thanks so much for this response. And after this particular question, I'm going to bring in Mr. Christian Gushwila to ask this question, because he's been asking questions relating to, providing tax holiday to support some of these companies that are trying to contribute to infrastructure development in Africa. But before we do, Isaac, the conversation with Eva on the informal sector, is it that they don't pay taxes at all? Because when you look at Nigeria, a country like Nigeria, officially, they must be paying taxes. But when you look at the market arena, as an example, there are stakeholders that are not government entities that, for example, in Nigeria, to collect taxes from the market women on a daily basis. And whenever I think about that, one of the things that comes to mind is that, do we need to use a non-conventional approach to get people in the informal sector to pay taxes, just like the way non-state actors are doing in the market arena in places like Nigeria, by asking that on a daily basis, you got to pay a certain amount of money before you can sell in the market space. So what are your thoughts on this? And example to share with us in terms of non-conventional approaches being used to get people in the informal sector to pay their taxes rather than formalizing them.
All right, thanks, Prof. Ghana. Well, taxing sector is one of the difficult areas for most tax authorities. Well, as you rightly said, is it an issue that they don't pay taxes at all, or the right amount is not being collected from them? From the Ghanaian perspective, those informal sector people have levels or ranks within the informal sector. You could see differences within the structures within the informal sector itself. Now, some of these people are being forced to pay something on a daily basis in Ghana here, which is normally collected by the municipal assemblies that they fall within. Vote from them. This is sometimes even after they've been chased for days, then they end up paying something to the people that have been sent to them to collect these market tolls. But the other aspect of it, which is very interesting, is tax amount. That is, at the end of their annual period or their accounting period, so to put it, do they pay taxes on their profits that they make at the end of the period? That's the bigger question now. Because from daily ones, that is like the market tolls, as I made mention, definitely there'll be somebody there to one way or the other to heckle them to collect this money from them. So you have a few of them paying. And that amount is sometimes nothing to write home about. Some are even less than $1. Or let me businesses, which is where tax comes in. Do they pay the taxes on this? And that's a big no. So they end up only paying the market tolls that people come to collect, and then other municipal taxes that they pay. But the main taxes that they're supposed to pay, they do not pay that to the government. And that's where the challenge is. So as you are suggesting, probably there should be some unconventional means of collecting taxes from these people. But I think so far, most of the African countries are employing this non-conventional means. That is, they're expecting people to come over to pay their taxes, which they are not doing. And then sometimes even if they send their own men there to go and then collect taxes, it becomes difficult for them to even audit them to know the amount of taxes that they're supposed to pay. So you realize that if the person is corrupt, as most people have said that where they feel some of the tax officials are corrupt, they come there and threaten you in the name of the law and then bill you with an amount of money that will not even go to the state. So I think it's high time there should be some basic accounting system for them to keep their records. Normal ledger, a normal accounting entry ledger for them to keep their records so that to be able to know the taxable amount that they're supposed to pay, then the government can find ways. Obviously, literacy is very low in most of our developing countries, and it's a challenge. You don't expect somebody who cannot read and write to be able to file a tax return. It's going to be very difficult for money. At the end of the month, some are even earning more than those engaged in the formal sector, but there are those who are not paying the taxes. So yes, the non-conventional methods have been tried in ways that is so far not helping. I think we need a blend of both the non-conventional way and formalized way of doing things, particularly in ways of them keeping their books. If they're able to keep their books well, then they can be able to know the tax amount that they're supposed to pay, and then with the introduction of alternative methods of payment, maybe able to helping and minimizing the number of people in the informal sector who do.
Yeah, I like your thought on this idea of the eclectic approach that blends the traditional and the conventional way of collecting taxes from people as a way of bringing more people in the informal sector into the tax payment net. Yeah, may I please call on Mr. Christian Bushwiller to be so much particular about giving some tax incentives to like entrepreneurs that are trying to invest more in driving infrastructural development in Africa. I'd like to bring him in to drive this conversation. Mr. Christian, could you please unmute yourself?
Oh, I'm here.
Yeah. Could you please speak louder?
Yes, I will try to speak louder, but my voice is very low. So I hope you can hear me now better.
Yeah, it's better. Thank you so much.
Okay, I wanted to bring myself into a discussion with our project Trans-Africa Railway Corporation. I am driving this project, this initiative. I was living 20 years of my first life in Ghana, so I know Ghana very well, and we are giving back to Africa by having started the project to build a 24,000 kilometer high-speed rail in sub-Africa, connecting all the capitals, ports and airports. This is an investment from 300 billion euro or US dollar in the African continent. It will take 10 years to build up the complete backbone. And as a matter of fact, we are talking about the private initiative, or it's the private sector who is investing private equity into the African market. And you're investing in infrastructure, so it must be in our business case possible that the tax authorities give us 10 years tax holidays, because it takes 10 years until everything is set up and running. And only then, when you can operate the full backbone after 10 years, only then you can make revenues with freights, you can make revenues with passenger transport. Only then the business case gets profitable, and only then you're able to pay taxes into the government. So this is my question. Is the government flexible enough to think about, this case? Because we have to discuss with them. If it is not possible to do it in Ghana, we have to look where else we need to set up our headquarters. Thank you very much for your information.
Thank you so much, Mr. Christian, for first question. And Isaac, as you reflect on this question, I also want you to reflect on what tax holiday for some of these companies means for development and growth in Africa. Because if you are giving them this tax holiday, how is it going to affect the revenue that the continent or different countries in the continent may be getting from tax revenue? And what will be the bigger impact of this on development in Ghana and elsewhere in Africa? So we would like to know your thought on this, because it's a very interesting conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Christian, and thanks, Prof. Deli. Well, on the issue of tax exemptions, I must say that Ghanaian tax laws include tax exemptions for some forms of businesses. Because the country is very deficient in the area of manufacturing, currently, I think any manufacturing industry that sets up in the country, we have zones. If you set up within the Greater Accra, that is where the capital is situated, you have about 5 years of tax holidays where you pay no taxes to the government. If you locate or situate your manufacturing business in the northern sector of the country where development is very low, you have about 10 years, I think, of tax holidays. So there is tax holidays for some forms of businesses in Ghana. But probably because road construction is not something that the government feels we are too deficient in terms of doing on our own, probably that is why there is no tax holiday for road construction business. But I also know that when construction business takes off, if there's the need for them to bring in some equipment that they cannot get within the country, if they are shipping it into the country, they on this equipment for them at the moment. So yes, there's tax holidays for businesses in Ghana, but it's mainly for manufacturing businesses. Those who want to set up manufacturing businesses, they have these tax holidays. Now, Mr. Jelly, you raised an interesting question about how this is going to affect the tax revenue of the country. And it's boiling in the country. Some people are concerned, some people have been estimated that in Ghana, within a year, we lose about 5 billion Ghana cedis to tax exempt businesses or foreign companies that come to set up. So it looks like it's a two-edged sword. You are trying to attract FDI or foreign direct investment into your country, but on the other side, you might be losing in terms of revenue. So it has become a dicey issue. Should we scrap it off? Because those who advocate for it being scrapped off are the sense that as it stands now, well, the democracy in Ghana is not that fragile. It's quite stable. So if we are to lure you here, we shouldn't really give you too much tax exemptions because we think maybe things will go wrong. No, things have been running quite smoothly. Not very well, but running quite smoothly. So let's say a year or two tax holidays might be enough than the 5 and 10 years that has been given to people to pay taxes. Some also raise the question that, well, you give them 5 years of tax exemptions. You pray for 5 years, and then after they tell you, well, we are no longer interested in running your country. We are moving to the next country. And it's not a big news. It's something that most of these foreign businesses have been doing. They run for 5 years. When the tax exemption period is over, they fold up and give some excuses and move to the next. So it's a dicey issue. It's something that I think if the investment coming into the country is huge enough, it's possible for the investor kind of consultation with the government to be given some form of tax holidays peculiar to the kind of investment that they are coming to make into the country. So yes, it's true. Tax holidays is there probably to bring people in, but also there is the other aspect of it. The country is losing tax revenue. So it's not for a thing. Supposed to operate in this country. Well, I think the prospects are no longer the way we see, so we are moving on. So it's something that calls for dialogue between the investors and then the tax officials.
Yeah, Yeah, so yeah, thanks so much for this interesting conversation. It's a part of our most interesting Anga series, and there is this demand that we need to bring you back, and I fully subscribe to that because we need to have a deeper dive into this issue of taxation in Africa, using Ghana as a case study. And I'd like to call on Solomon Okai to please unmute himself and drive the conversation by either asking a question or offering his or comment. So Solomon Okai, please unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. Please, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
All right, thank you very much. I must say that I really enjoyed the presentation from Isaac. It's a great presentation. I mean, he touched on all the areas. Only that I was finding it difficult to separate between the revenue mobilization, the categories of the revenue mobilization. You mentioned somewhere about the communication service tax, and then you talked about the GRA. So I just wanted to find out the survey the Afrobarometer conducted, was it related to revenues collected by the GRA, or revenue collection within the broad scope of Ghana? But when you look at the revenue mobilization structure, we have citizens mainly paying taxes at the local level to local authorities in the form of property taxes, market tolls, and what have you. And when it comes to the national level, where you talk about the high level taxes, the high level taxes. So I wanted to find out whether the citizens were responding to the questions in terms of they paying taxes at the district level, or citizens paying taxes to the GRA. That kind of nexus was quite unclear for me. That is what I just wanted to find out. And secondly is the issue of automation. The communication service tax is largely automated. So the moment you buy your airtime, the deductions are taxed, which was, I think, 9% reduced to 5%. I don't know whether it has been increased again. What opportunities are there? What opportunities are there to make taxation generally automated, so that there is no need for us using this conventional means of people going to chase people and counter for issues and what have you? What opportunities are there from where you sit as the I think you are a duty bearer with the Ghana Audit Service, if I'm correct. I mean, from where you sit, what opportunities are there to fully automate a system such that you sit from the comfort of your home, and then you engage, you go through your tax obligation without going through this hassle here and there. So basically, this is what I just want to get clear from you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Solomon, for your question. Thank you very much. Well, to your first question, now the questions that Afrobarometer posed was in twofold. First, they were asked, do you think the tax authorities in a country have the right to make people pay taxes? This question goes to any government mandated body that pays taxes, whether it's at a high level, being a GRA, or whether it's at your local level, being your metropolitan or municipal or district assembly. This was the first question the question I was posed to them. Do you think they have the right to make people pay taxes? And that's what most Ghanaians agree to, that, well, the tax authorities have the right to make people pay taxes. But as you rightly said, at the municipal or metropolitan level, that's where they collect the market tolls, the property rates, the rent rates that they collect. Those are the municipal level. Now, the specific question was asked, do you trust tax officials, example of Ghana Revenue Authority? So the issue of the trust and the perception on the corruption was specifically at the national level for the Ghana Revenue Authority. So I'm sure this can clarify your confusion so far.
Yeah.
Now, on the issue of the automation, some of the initiatives that the Ghana Revenue Authority has introduced now, one has to be the alternative methods of payment, where now they want people to pay their taxes through the mobile mobile money app, or internet banking, or direct bank transfer, or even using a debit or a credit card to make payment. So they are shifting from the previous ways of paying taxes, which has to be the companies issuing checks to the Ghana revenue authorities for tax payment, or the companies walking direct to their tax offices to make payments. So they're introducing some new alternative methods which are automated to enhance the payment of taxes. But as you know, it's always going to come with some challenges. I'm sure from your name, I'm sure you're a Ghanaian, and you might have heard of the guru men in-betweeners who normally do some of this business. Pushing them aside and making everything electronic, they are going to resent it. So definitely there are going to be some few challenges along the line. But it's a good step they've taken now that, well, they want to automate the process of payment. Not just the process of payment, but they've also introduced an online way of computing your tax liability. So there's a portal on their website where when you go, you put in some few details and it will be able to calculate your tax liability and the amount of tax you are supposed to pay to the state. So on the area of automation, that is what is happening. And then you made mention also of the communication service tax, CST. Well, you are right. It was initially 9%, but following agitations from the general public, it has been reduced again to 5%. So as usual, the communication service companies are pushing it down to the users. So once you buy your recharge card, once you buy your internet data, you know there's a 5% cost on it now. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Mr. Isaac Bortey. And there are many more people that are ready to engage this conversation. But I'm sorry to all our participants that we need to call it a day. It's been a very interesting section, listening to one of our scholars from the Leaders of Africa Institute lead this very important conversation, bringing a lot of interesting talking points to be able to engage the discussion on taxation in Ghana in particular. And there are a lot of insightful moments, instructive, insightful moments for African countries to learn from this conversation with us today. And I'd like to thank you once again, Mr. Isaac Bortey, for today's presentation. And I'd like to thank all of you that have joined us live to have this conversation. We're always excited to see the success of our Institute scholars succeed in their research and in their various professionals. So it was an honor to have one of the distinguished alumni from the Leaders of Africa Institute lead this presentation today. Thank you everyone for joining us in Leaders of Africa Hangouts. We hope that you join us again at our next section. In the meantime, please do hit that subscribe button to subscribe to the Leaders of Africa on YouTube channel. And please do join our Discourse community at leadersofafrica.org/connect to continue the conversation and for future program alive. And it is on this note that we'll be calling it a day. Thank you and bye-bye.